Hello everybody, and welcome back to my War Thunder Tips and Tricks series. Today we're going to be talking about late game ammunitions, specifically APDS, APDS-FS, HEAT-FS, and HESH. These ammunitions are really going to be the ones that you use when you get to the later tiers and are very common at tier 5. However, some of them do appear before tier 5, as you can see on your screen right now. I don't have data on the Japanese tanks, but I do know that they use the same rifle gun as the Leopard, for instance, the M60 pattern. So I assume that this is how it's going to be, but I'm not really sure what they will and won't get. So I put question marks behind them because this is coming out before the Japanese come out, and I don't know. So without further ado, let's jump into basically the pros and cons of these different ammunition types. So for the pros and cons, let's start out with APDS and APDS-FS. These are essentially the same thing. There's really not a whole lot of difference. And for the pros, they do very well against ammo. In my opinion, I think that they're the best versus ammo racks, and they consistently detonate them when they get hit. They also are very high penetration shots, and they, especially against flat armor, do very well penetrating just about any tank in the game. They're very fast firing, and what I mean by that is the velocity on them is very high, in excess of 1600 meters per second, which is very fast. They do very well against engines and fuel tanks, pretty consistently starting them on fire, and it's also, in my opinion, the most accurate round in the game. At very long distances, they can snipe things and hit just about exactly where you're aiming. Their cons are that they're not very good against any kind of sloped armor, and this is the biggest downfall to APDS, is that they just don't have it when it comes to fighting stuff like the Russians. I don't know what it is, but they just don't have it. They also tend to get eaten up by tracks and wheels and stuff on the sides of tanks, and when they do penetrate, they sometimes just kind of get lost. I'm not really sure how to put that, but they just don't do a whole lot of damage every once in a while, and this inconsistency can get quite frustrating. Now for HEAT-FS, for the pros, we have fairly similar stuff. They're very good against ammunition racks, engines, fuel, but they do very well against crew members, which APDS doesn't always do. They also do very good against sloped armor, some of the best penetration values against sloped armor in the game. And they also go pretty fast. They're not quite as fast as APDS, but their muzzle velocity is very high nonetheless. That being said, for their cons, they are slightly inaccurate. This is for reasons to talk about when we get into actually what is HEAT-FS, but they are slightly inaccurate, especially when compared to APDS. They also can't penetrate objects. This could be anything from spaced armor on the tank to a fence outside of the tank or whatever. They can't go through objects, and APDS can. Other solid shots, of course, can as well. And they also tend to get eaten up by tracks and spaced armor, but I mean, pretty much any tank firing at almost any shell will get eaten up by tracks and spaced armor, so that's really not an issue between APDS and HEAT-FS, but it's more noticeable with HEAT-FS and APDS than I think a lot of other shells. They tend to get bucculated, I guess, with those things. They also are very expensive to use. HEAT-FS tends to be the most expensive type of round you can fire, in excess of 1,000 silver per shot, and that means that you're basically going to lose money whenever you use it, and that's kind of frustrating. That being said, APDS can also be very expensive depending on what tier you're using it at. Stuff like tier 4 British, tier 3 British, APDS is certainly not cheap. So let's move on to HESH, and HESH is not good. Let me just put that frankly. On paper, it doesn't look too bad. Its pros are that it's very good against sloped armor, it does massive damage, and when it does penetrate, it does have a lot of spread, and it tends to hit lots of stuff inside of the tank. That being said, I don't know what it is, but it literally can't detonate ammo racks. I think I've killed stuff with ammo rack explosions like twice before with a HESH shell, and I've fired thousands of HESH shells. I mean, they very, very rarely do stuff. Um, they're also pretty mediocre against fuel tanks. They don't always set them on fire. And the shrapnel that it spits out doesn't always go through objects. It doesn't have a whole lot of penetration. It's usually ammo racks, crew members, whatnot will eat up all the fragments. They're also pretty inaccurate and have very low velocities, usually half to 60% of what APDS or HESH has. And this all kind of molds together into a very inaccurate, unreliable shell that just isn't real good. So with all those pros and cons, then one of them has to be the best. And yeah, I mean that's very true. That's HESH, cheat FS if you will. It's obviously the best. Its cons are, you can pretty much ignore all of it except for the fact that it's expensive. I mean, you can avoid shooting through buildings, you can avoid shooting at tracks, you can avoid that. And, you know, even when you're using APDS, you kind of have to avoid that a little bit. But the pros are just so much. It's awesome against sloped armor. It has stupidly high penetration values. It travels very fast. I mean, it's not overly inaccurate. I mean, it's slightly inaccurate, but I mean, compared to the laser guided precision of APDS, I mean, yeah, anything is going to look inaccurate. It's just, they're very, very good rounds. And APDS is a very good round as well. It's just not as good. And HESH is trash. Don't use HESH. It's very, very shitty, to put it mildly. Yeah, I would say that if you're trying to ball on a budget, APDS is the way to go. If money is an issue, stick with HESH, or HESH, sorry. If money is an issue, stick with HESH. If you're just trying to go for lols, try HESH. I mean, who knows, you might like it. I don't particularly enjoy it, but it's not like it's well, I mean, it's almost the worst round in the game. HE is the worst round in the game, but it definitely fights for that position. It's got a good, strong argument for the worst round in the game. It tries hard to stay at the bottom. So let's kind of look at what makes them tick and what really are APDS and HESH and HESH and all that good stuff. Well, let us start out with APDS, or Armor Piercing Discarding Sabot. And by the way, Sabot is a French word, and English pronunciation of T does not appear in French pronunciation, so Sabot is not how you pronounce this word. It's
Sabot.
Thanks, Google. Anyways, APDS is one of the two main rounds the top tiers use, and it is, under the majority of circumstances, the inferior of the two. Yeah, cheat FS is better in nearly every single way. What you do need to know is that APDS is still not bad. In fact, it is one of the main reasons I love the British. Yes, it's hard to use. Yes, it can give some pretty bullshit what just happened moments, but it's still one of the best ways to one-shot enemies. It's laser accurate, and when combined with decent mobility, like that on most MBTs that use APDS round, ironically, except the Chieftain, it is an awesome way to finish enemies from the sides in 1 to 2 shots. The ways APDS operates is somewhat strange. APDS was developed in the 40s by French and British designers and was fielded towards the end of World War II, namely on the 17-pounder gun used by the Firefly, Black Prince, and Achilles, and the 77mm gun on the Comet. APDS is similar to APCR in that a sub-caliber round is fired from a large caliber gun. The main difference is that at APCR, the sub-caliber rounds, quote-unquote, grips, or whatever you want to call the flanges that prevent the round from being too small for being a gun, stay attached during flight, increasing drag and slowing the projectile down considerably. The discarding sabot, as the name implies, discards these grips, commonly referred to as pots for APDS shells, for their shape, supposedly. One of the ways it does this is by giving the pots lips, which will catch the air and force them off the round. Some will use centrifugal force to remove the pots, but when it spins they tend to fall out. It really doesn't matter how they are removed. What matters is that a small, very hard round is traveling at a stupidly high velocity towards you, or at the enemy. This makes it do fantastic against armor. That means APDS is one of the mainstays of armor penetration to this day, and is one of the only kinetic rounds that is used anymore. It's used pretty much all main battle tanks right now. I made a video covering the use of solid shot, so check that out if you want to know how to actually use APDS. 90% of what you need to know about using APDS is in that video, and the last 10% is shoot for ammo first, cruise second. It's basically how to use APDS. So let's next look at heat, and what is heat and cheat FS? Well, for starters, heat or high explosive anti-tank. The FS means thin stabilized. Within the context of tanks, not infantry weaponry, heat was developed to make short-barreled howitzers the ability to fight heavy armor, just like the high-velocity guns of their brethren. Essentially, it is a shaped charge that melts and propels a metal, typically copper, at a very high velocity through enemy armor. This shoots the liquid metal jet into the tank upon successful penetration of the enemy armor. Heat is very common in all German tanks, and early and post-war tanks of almost all nations also contain heat. When advancements in heat were made to make it so it wouldn't lose so much spray off from centrifugal forces, these fins basically stop the rotation, meaning the copper jet doesn't have a tendency to lose power from having less of the material spin off, basically. Cheat FS was born. Suddenly, the once obsolete heat shells became usable again. This means that most early war tanks like the Panzer IV, the Stumpy 75s, the Russian Su-122, and the Sherman 105 all use heat very effectively. Similarly, which we're mostly talking about, the post-war tanks that use heat FS boast some of the best penetration in the game, and upwards of 400 millimeters of armor. Tanks like the Leopard 1, M60, and T-10M all have very good heat FS rounds. Just like APHE, the British do not use heat or heat FS, instead they get HESH and APDS for their post-war vehicles. When using heat, it is much like using a solid shot. Heat does not have an explosive core like APHE, the explosion happens outside of the tank, not inside, and as such it should be used mostly exactly the same as you would solid shot. That being said, heat has some major bonuses that solid shot does not. For one, heat usually has the best penetration for its tier. At tiers 1, 2, and 5, where heat and heat FS are at their best, heat has either the best or damn near the best penetration for that tier. As such, you can largely ignore enemy armor with heat, and will do very well against pretty much anything at its tier or below. Also, heat is the best round to combat sloped armor. This is especially useful at tier 5. Because of the way that heat penetrates, it basically has more to do with hydrodynamics than it does normal statics or dynamics with regards to physics and engineering. This means a couple of things. One, I'm not smart enough to teach you how it 100% works, and two, that both the penetrating jet and the armor acts like liquids, and due to this, somehow heat ignores just about everything I talk about with regards to penetration, normalization, shear forces, etc. These all have no effect on it. If it quote-unquote sees 150 millimeters armor, even with a slope, there is no extra bullshit you have to deal with. It just penetrates the 150 millimeters, and if it can in fact penetrate the 150 millimeters, it's going to penetrate. No extra bullshit required. There's no dealing with anything extra. It's pretty simple. This means that slopes that are effective versus solid shot or APHE are rendered useless versus the super high penetration of heat. But also remember that heat can still bounce or not penetrate at all if the slope is enough. It is not a 100% chance to pen, like a 90%. I'm kidding, but seriously, if you take a half second to aim in, you'll never have a problem penetrating with heat or heat FS. And that alone makes heat, but more of heat FS, the best rounds in the game. Literally, their only downside is they don't have an explosive area inside of the tank. And, well, they cost an arm and a leg to use. Also, on mid-tiers like tier 3 and 4, usually you're using the exact same heat shells you had at tier 1 and 2, so, you know, those mid-tiers, heat is pretty trash. But once you get to tier 5, heat FS, which is really the best heat round in the game, the best round in the game, they become very usable again. I mean, very usable. And on a side note, I fucking loved researching heat, and if you love engineering or killing tanks and stuff, go take an afternoon and research heat. There's so much cool stuff that I could go on, and I really don't have time to talk about. But you could take a couple of hours and look at some of the stuff. I'll send some links in the description. It's a good start. It's definitely a good time reading if you're interested in that kind of thing. Anyways, off topic. Next we have HESH, High Explosive Squash Head. It's basically a big explosive charge fired from the cannon and flattened out, detonated on impact, usually C4. So how does it work? Well, basically HESH was, in reality, the do-all end-all for tanks. It almost single-handedly made heavily armored tanks useless. I mean, Cheetah-Fest and APDS did their part, but HESH, in real life, does not need to physically penetrate an enemy, and the thickness of armor is, for the most part, ignored. This alone makes HESH in real life one of the most important reasons that stuff like reactive armor and composites really became a mainstay, because just straight steel HESH will dominate all day. However, in-game, HESH acts like a big HE shot, which it's not. It's very different. And HESH makes the metal vibrate, which will cause fragments inside to spray all over, and that's how HESH operates. It's not so much about penetrating tanks, it's about making the metal vibrate and send fragments inside the tank. But that's really not how it works in game. In game, it has to actually, quote unquote, penetrate enemies, and this isn't really how it works in real life. Here you can see that the Leopard's HESH rounds have 145 millimeters of penetration at all ranges and all angles. This is kind of accurate because HESH really doesn't care about the angle of armor, and the distance doesn't matter to whether or not HESH is going to penetrate, or not penetrate, do damage, I should say. But there is also some inaccuracies. At super high angles, HESH might not squash properly and will spread out too much, not doing enough, causing the metal to vibrate enough. And also, there's just other things that can mess up HESH, but for the most part, the way HESH is modeled in this game is trash, horrible. So really, any armor that's 146 millimeters or greater, HESH can't penetrate. So things like the front of T-54's turrets, pretty much anything on the mouse, IS-4, all very problematic for HESH. Whereas in reality, hitting these things with a HESH shell would cause the armor to basically turn into a big old tuning fork. As you can imagine, steel vibrating several thousand hertz is going to fragment a little bit, and these fragments would kill crew or modules even if the HESH shell failed to penetrate. Most HESH shells didn't have to penetrate in real life, but whatever, right? Anyways, if heavy armor, which, by the way, again, HESH was designed to take out, is the Achilles heel of HESH in War Thunder, how do we use it? Well, you don't. That's the simple answer. Every game that has HESH has a stock APDS round that's 10 times better. Really, the only thing HESH in its current state is good for is combating Leopards and AA tanks, especially the more heavily armored ones that are based on actual tank chassis. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Kugelblitz. Because of its low velocity, basically half that of APDS, it's pretty unreliable in penetration and damage, and HESH is really more of a novelty than a necessity. However, I'm supposed to talk about how do we use HESH, so let's go through the basics. First thing to note is that it is actually good against sloped armor. Since most sloped armor is in fact less than 145 millimeters, you can pretty easily penetrate things like the T-54 series upper glaciers, parts of the IS-3's hull, stuff like that. Next thing you need to know is that HESH is both A, horrible versus ammo racks, and B, tends to get eaten up by modules, tracks, really anything that it hits that isn't crew. And even crew members who are dead or wounded will soak up a lot of the damage. So when you aim HESH, you need to find fairly open parts of the tank, both inside and out. So shooting HESH directly behind an ammo rack can result in 90% of the round being eaten by the ammo rack and the last 10% barely doing anything at all. Ammo rack detonations are so rare with HESH that I literally can only remember like one or two. Like, I like to consider ammo racks extra armor and actively avoid them when using HESH. The last thing you need to remember is that HESH is still just a large, huge, high explosive. If you hit something close to thin armor, like the hull roof when hitting the front of a turret face, it sometimes gets splash damage down in the shot shaft. This is useful when dealing with things like the mouse, which is, as far as I know, the only way to kill a mouse with HESH is splashing it down into the engine deck. So, I mean, that's pretty much it for HESH. That's all I really got to talk about. Remember, EDFS #1, then APDS. Don't ever use HESH. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will catch you guys later.